This elderly man walked to the beach every single day, always waiting for something. His friends felt sorry for him and thought he was just wasting his time. But then, one day, a wolf showed up on the sand, and just like that, his sadness melted into joy. Henry, now 63 years old, had made it a habit to sit by the beach every day. Everyone in the area knew about it, but no one really understood why he kept going. The man heard the whispers and the quiet gossip from his neighbors, but he didn't let it get to him. The ache in his heart was far louder than anything they could say. The last year had been painfully hard on him. The woman he loved, his wife, who had been by his side for decades, passed away after a long, draining fight with cancer. Losing Margaret left him feeling completely lost. They had been together since they were kids, and now, without her, he had no idea how to carry on. He kept a Jasper necklace close, something they had picked up together on a trip to Africa. It was the only thing that made him feel like she was still around, even though she wasn't. Most days he'd just sit alone in the quiet parts of the house, holding the necklace tight in his hands, surrounded by memories that brought both comfort and pain. Henry had stopped eating properly. He let his appearance slip. It was clear he was falling apart. His son saw it too and knew he had to do something to pull his father out of that dark place. He figured what Henry needed most was a little company, someone to care for again. So he brought home a puppy, a dark brown Siberian husky with sharp eyes and a lively spirit. The dog was young, full of energy, and completely untrained, but his son believed that maybe this could be a good distraction, a purpose. But he hadn't realized just how closed off his father had become. Henry didn't want to make space for anyone new, not even a dog. The man kept his distance from the puppy, only doing the basics, feeding him, making sure he had water. But when the puppy tried to play or get close, Henry would gently lock him away in his kennel, keeping both physical and emotional space between them. He never even gave the puppy a name. It was easier that way, to not get attached. Every day was the same, Henry going through the motions, the puppy bouncing around trying to bring life into the house, and Henry quietly shutting it out. Still, the little husky didn't give up. No matter how cold or distant Henry was, the puppy kept trying, wagging his tail, nudging for attention, and always hopeful. Then, one quiet day, something shifted. Henry was sitting in the living room, lost in thought, when he noticed something odd. The usual thumping of paws and soft barks had stopped. The silence felt strange, too quiet. Curious and a little concerned, Henry stepped into the hallway that led to what used to be his and Margaret's bedroom. What he saw when he opened the door stopped him in his tracks and changed everything between him and the puppy. There, curled up on the bed, was the small, fluffy dog holding something in his tiny paws. It was the Jasper necklace, Margaret's necklace. Somehow the puppy had found it and was now laying there quietly, almost protectively, as if it brought him peace too. It was clear that the little dog had been drawn to the scent, maybe the feeling, of something important. That necklace had always been so precious to Henry, tied to memories he could barely speak of. Seeing the puppy resting with it on the very bed that once held so much love hit Henry hard. He stood there, unmoving, watching the gentle rise and fall of the puppy's chest. And then, without even thinking, a name bubbled up from deep inside him. He called the puppy Jasper, after the necklace, after Margaret, after this exact moment that cracked something open in his heart. That simple name felt right. It held meaning. It felt like a small bridge between past and present, between the woman he had lost and the tiny creature that had somehow found a way into his life. As he stood in the doorway, that long frozen warmth inside him began to stir. The way Jasper held the necklace so gently reminded him of trust, love, and the connection he'd thought he'd lost forever. From that day on, things started to change between Henry and the dog. Slowly, gently, but definitely. The man who once kept his distance now began to open up to the little husky who had, in his own quiet way, waited for him. Henry stopped treating Jasper like a chore. He began to see him for what he was, a friend, a small heart full of love who had picked him. He started walking him every day, letting the breeze and the ocean air carry away bits of his pain. The beach, which had once been a place of mourning, started to feel like a place of new beginnings. Over time, their days grew fuller. Jasper was no longer just being fed and let outside. He was being loved. Henry would laugh at his stubborn refusal to sit still, even during training. He found himself amazed by how quickly the dog learned, how sharp and silly he could be. The house, once quiet and heavy, now echoed with movement and joy. Henry was proud to be Jasper's person. As the months passed, Henry changed too. He wasn't just grieving anymore, he was living again. Walks with Jasper led to chats with other dog owners. He found himself part of a little group who met in the park, coffee in hand, while their dogs tumbled and played. He began eating again, sometimes at home, sometimes out. But no matter where he went, he asked for a table for two, always for him and Jasper. The quiet, lonely man who once felt like he had nothing left to live for was now just a memory. In his place stood someone full of warmth, with love pouring from him again. Henry's son couldn't have been more grateful. He had his dad back, and deep down he knew it was all thanks to that little husky who had walked into their lives when they needed it most. But what his son didn't know was that life was about to pull the rug out from under Henry again, and this time there would be nothing he could do to make it better. One sunny morning, just like any other, Henry and Jasper headed to the beach for their usual routine. After a round of playful frisbee, Henry sank into his beach chair, smiling as he watched Jasper sprint through the sand. But then, in the blink of an eye, Jasper was gone. At first, Henry thought maybe he'd just wandered behind the dunes. He stood up, looked around, and called his name. Nothing. Panic hit fast. Henry started running, calling louder. People nearby noticed and joined in the search. The waves were calm, the road was far, and there were no signs Jasper had gone toward either. A narrow trail leading through some thick bushes and into the nearby woods caught Henry's eye, and he rushed through it. Still, there was no trace of Jasper. For days, Henry and his friends from the park combed through the area. They put up posters, called shelters, and knocked on doors. But with every passing day, fewer people showed up to help. The trail had gone cold. It was like Jasper had vanished into thin air. The loss hit Henry like a punch to the chest. Just when he'd begun to feel whole again, life had taken a piece of his heart and hidden it away. The beach, once filled with laughter and wagging tails, now felt hollow. He kept going back every day, just in case. He sat in his usual chair, eyes scanning the shoreline, waiting, hoping, listening for pause he couldn't hear anymore. The sound of the waves, once so comforting, now sounded like a lullaby for something missing. But even in his sadness, he wasn't alone. The community that had formed around him didn't disappear. People stopped to check in. Strangers became friends. They asked if there was any news, offered to help, and sometimes just sat beside him in silence. Still, no Jasper. Weeks turned into months, and then into years. Henry never stopped hoping, never stopped looking. He simply couldn't believe that the world could be cruel enough to take both his wife and his dog. Most days he'd just sit there, staring at the waves like they held secrets he wasn't ready to hear. And then, one day, everything shifted. It was a morning like any other. Same chair, same spot, same view of the horizon. But something felt off. Not wrong exactly, just different. A strange stillness settled over him, like the wind had paused and the world was holding its breath. Henry couldn't explain it, but he felt it, as if something, or someone, was watching. The hairs on his neck stood up. His chest tightened. Something was coming. He just didn't know what. Turning slowly, Henry felt a chill run through his body as his eyes locked onto an unexpected sight. Standing at the edge of the beach was a lone wolf staring straight at him. Its eyes didn't just glance, they focused, sharp and unwavering. Henry should have been scared, but he wasn't. The only thing running through his mind was how strange it was to see a wild wolf here, of all places. There was a small forest not too far off, but still, It didn't make sense for a wolf to just show up on the beach like that. Time seemed to freeze. Neither of them moved. They just stared at each other across the quiet sand. Then, almost like someone had snapped their fingers, the moment broke. The wolf turned around and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Henry rooted in place, confused and shaken. Most people would have never gone back after something like that. But Henry wasn't most people. Instead of fear, something else sparked inside him: curiosity. He kept returning to the beach, not out of habit anymore, but because he needed to understand what he'd seen. Why hadn't the wolf growled or run off? Why did it feel like the animal had been watching him, not just passing by? Henry knew it sounded strange, even to him. When his son pleaded with him to move somewhere safer, Henry almost agreed. But something deep inside told him there was more to this, something important he wasn't supposed to miss. So he stayed. Each day passed the same way. The tide rolled in, the sun rose and fell, but there was no sign of the wolf. Still, Henry kept coming, waiting and hoping. The beach became something new, part comfort, part mystery. It held something just out of reach. Then one evening, just when doubt was starting to take over, the wolf came back. It stood there again, against the soft colors of the setting sun, almost glowing in the fading light. But this time, it didn't leave. It held its place, locking eyes with Henry once more. Henry didn't move right away. Something about the way the wolf stood, the way it looked at him, it felt familiar. Slowly, carefully, he stepped forward. The wolf didn't flinch. It didn't back away. It just stared, those same piercing, icy blue eyes, never leaving his. And that's when it hit him. There was something in those eyes that tugged at his memory, something he knew deep in his bones. It was impossible, ridiculous even. But the thought wouldn't let go. Could this wolf be Jasper? His Jasper? It made no sense. Years had passed, but those eyes, that look, they were just like the pup who had once filled his world with joy. Feeling a lump rise in his throat, Henry took a breath and called out the name that had lived in his heart every day since Jasper disappeared. "Jasper," he said softly. The word hung in the air like a prayer. And then something incredible happened. The wolf's eyes lit up, not just a flicker, but something deeper. Recognition. It was as if the name had pulled a string that connected them across time and understanding. The wolf didn't just react. It ran to Henry with a burst of energy that felt more like a homecoming than anything wild. Laughter burst from Henry's chest, loud, free, and full of disbelief. He hadn't laughed like that in years. The thin, scruffy wolf, no, Jasper, reached him and buried his head against Henry's chest like no time had passed at all. Henry dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around the animal he thought he'd lost forever. A mess of emotions, relief, joy, amazement, poured over him like a wave. Jasper, once a clumsy little pup, had somehow returned, grown, wilder, but still his. How had he missed it before? The subtle things, the quiet strength, the way he'd always been a little different from the other dogs. Maybe Jasper had always had that wild spark inside him. Maybe the pull of nature had been too strong. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was this moment, that he'd come back. The bench nearby, the same one where Henry had once sat in silence and grief, now stood beside a scene no one would have believed. Man and dog reunited. Their bond, once frayed by time and mystery, now stronger than ever. Henry felt tears slide down his cheeks as Jasper leaned into his touch. Despite all the years, all the changes, that deep trust had never left. The beach, the waves, the wind, all of it seemed to shift, like the world was breathing a sigh of relief with them. Henry's mind filled with memories. Jasper's goofy jumps as a pup, his stubborn refusal to sit still, the way he used to follow Henry around the house with endless curiosity. And now, here he was, no longer a puppy, but something even more remarkable. Somehow Jasper had survived on his own. He had found his way through the wild and still come back. This wasn't the life Henry had planned. It was full of pain and loss, twists he never expected. But right now, all he could feel was gratitude. He looked down at Jasper, eyes still filled with wonder. This wasn't just about a lost dog found. This was about something deeper, something unexplainable. The sea in front of them seemed to whisper 1,000 stories, and Henry knew theirs was one of them, etched into the sand, carried by the wind. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with soft gold and pink, Henry and Jasper stood side by side on the beach. The routine that had once held only memories now opened the door to something new. More days, more walks, more quiet moments under the stars. If you felt moved by Henry and Jasper's incredible journey, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe for more heartwarming animal stories like this one.